Hi, I'm Glen Poole. I'm from the UK. You probably gathered already. And I run a consultancy called Helping Men, and I run an online campaign called Equality for Men. And I am a 21st century man. Who remembers the 21st century starting? Do you remember where you were? Yeah, right. I remember it really clearly because I've got a picture at home. It's a bit, it's New Year's Eve, 1999, right? And I've got a picture of my daughter. She was 2 at the time, and she's wearing like a sparkly waist, sat at a table having a big party. Sparkly waistcoat, big feather boa that she got for Christmas. She's got a great smile, wide eyes. I think Granny's left a champagne glass in front of her, and she looks like she's drinking out of it. Maybe she was. And I remember tuning into Australia because I tuned into the fireworks here in Sydney. And you beat us to the new year again, something you do every year. Unlike the cricket, Julian, right? I wasn't supposed to mention it, was I? I apologise. The sandbag's coming out already. I apologise. And I also remember that time really clearly because it was, excuse me, it's the last time I spent Christmas in my marital home. I was, at the end of the 90s, I was a full-time house husband and homemaker, and it was just the best time of my life. Every day with my daughter, I loved it. It was great. And real privilege, real privilege being there with your children when they're that young on a daily basis and watching them grow day by day. It's a real privilege. And my wife left me, and I got a letter from a solicitor saying, well, you've made a valid contribution in the first 2 years of your daughter's life, but it's no longer in her best interest that you look after her. So that's when I found out about what happens sometimes to dads and to men and boys in the world, and that's when I got really interested in men's work. So before we talk about 21st century man and look ahead a century, that's a long time, a century. I think it's important to perhaps look back a century. I was really struck by Randall Ross on Tuesday morning talking about how he works with Indigenous men and how they look at what happened to the Indigenous males as a result of colonisation. They take them back and they look at that. And he said it's not to point the finger of blame. It's to understand our past so that we can make sense of it and also then create something new for the future. And as I was listening to that, I thought, yeah, I really get that. I can really see the importance of that, the healing of that. And I also thought, we could do that in different ways for men and boys of all cultures. There's a lot to understand about what's happened in the last century. We're going to try to work out how to help men in the next century. So if you look back 100 years, that was 1913. From a UK perspective, the year before we had the greatest symbol of the way gender was done then, the whole sort of women and children first. The Titanic went down, and 100% of children in first class and second class were saved. 75% of all women on board were saved, and only 20% of men were saved. 80% of men on the boat died, putting women and children first. And then in 1914, 99 years ago, we know what happened in 1914. The impact reached around the world, and millions of men were sent to their death. And from a UK perspective, most of those men didn't have a right to vote for the government that sent them to their death. They didn't have voting rights. And when we look back at that century, and we talk about the history of that century, we teach our boys about the history of that century, we teach them about the suffrage and what women went through. But we don't teach them about what men went through. We don't teach them about the suffragettes who are pushing white feathers into the hands of teenage boys and young men to shame them as cowards to go and fight and die for the country. Now, I don't think we should share this to blame anyone, but I think we need to share this kind of stuff with men growing up to understand it. So as we come back to the sort of 20th century, 2013, my daughter's 16 now. And in the UK, that's the age where they start last 2 years of college before university. She's a gorgeous young woman, and she's just started a college right next door to where I live. And she's been in and out of the house, my house, our home, every single day. It's the first time in 14 years that I've been in her life every single day. When I was looking forward to the 21st century, when she was 2, I had this expectation that I would just be there every single day. It's not been like that for 14 years. And I'm one of the lucky ones. And I've met some guys who have much worse than I do. So I'm making sense of what happened to me as I transitioned from the 20th and 21st century. I think we all need to do that, right? For ourselves and for our brothers, so that we can move forward. So what happened? Why did I, such a clearly intelligent and handsome man, become a house husband? Because it was an opportunity. Thanks, Warren. Because it's an opportunity. Because I'm great with kids. Because I'm a great homemaker. I had great role models for that. And because my wife earned 3 times more than me. She was a city lawyer. And I've been looking back on when women became lawyers. In 1922, the very first woman became a lawyer in the UK. I cannot imagine what it was like trying to be a woman pioneering being a lawyer with 100% professionals, 100% male. I can't imagine what struggles they had. And in 50 years, right through till 1972, in that 50 years, still only 3% of lawyers were women. It's incredible, right? Because when you look now, just another 40 years, in the UK, it's 50-50. And not just that, at university, 2/3 of law students are women. So we can change what happens in terms of gender roles rapidly in a few decades. We've done it for women in the workplace. We've done it for women in education. And, it's been uneven. We know that. But what about the areas where it's men who have the inequality and the disadvantage? What's there to change? So I'm going to chuck some UK statistics at you. So right now, these are statistics from right now, 99% of soldiers who died in Afghanistan, they were men. 75% of suicides, men. 12 guys in the UK will kill themselves today, on average. 90% of rough sleepers, homeless guys, are men. 95% of guys in prison are men. 96% of workplace deaths are men. We estimate 20,000 occupational deaths in the UK every year. The majority of them are men. Globally, over 80% of violent deaths every year are men. Back in the UK, I only found this one out recently. You've got to dig sometimes to get to the bottom of this stuff. 96% of racially motivated murder victims are men. 2/3 of victims of homophobic crime are men. 4 out of 5 children excluded from school are boys, and at school, nearly 90% of teachers are women in primary school, and 97% of teachers in nursery schools are women. And for parents who live apart from their children, like me, 92% of us are men, are dads. Imagine what it would be like in 40 years' time if we could radically change that and the way that we've changed some of the domains for women. This isn't new stuff. Our brothers in the men's movement were pointing to this stuff 60s, 70s, 80s. And I don't want to be standing here in 40 years' time. Well, I do want to be standing in 40 years, but maybe not here, as an elder, pointing to the same statistics and looking back and going, what was it like in 2013, and in 2053 we're still saying the same stuff. We need to do something about this stuff. Because there are other countries just starting this journey. So we've got to understand it for ourselves, for our own brothers. Understood what our fathers and our forefathers have been through where it hasn't worked. For us, for our countries, but for the countries that are coming up behind us in terms of their evolution and development. For the men and for the women, to help make those transitions in a way that does it better than we did, to learn fast from the mistakes of the past. So let's try and simplify it, right? Over the last 40 years, it's been 40 years, 50 years ago, it was really clear. Men were the provider, women were the carers, broadly speaking. Now what's happened is we've not had a reversal of roles. There's been a diversification of roles. So women now can be the provider for themselves or provider in a relationship, mostly a provider and a carer mostly, but a bit of a provider, or a carer who's been cared for and provided for. Now guys have that diversification as well, but women it's quite even, an even spread. There seems to be more choices. Whereas guys, there's just a few guys in those sort of the edges, and most still in the similar role. And there's our invisible lot. Okay, thank you. The invisible lot, who are the homeless, the suicides, the imprisoned, the excluded from school, the ones that aren't providing and caring for anyone, not providing and caring for themselves, the brothers that we are failing to provide for and care for. Because we don't provide and care for those boys growing up, we don't actually give them the opportunity to become either a provider or a carer. And those choices are available as we go to the future. As I look to the future, I see gender's not rigid, gender's diverse. It's diverse in all of us. I meet men and women who have a broad range of ways of expressing gender, right? Like gender to me, in the future, gender qualities is like a toolbox, ranging from maybe like a sledgehammer to a pair of tweezers. And if you've got a toolbox, tools aren't dangerous, tools are great. If you use them wrongly, they're dangerous, right? If you're not taught how to use a range of tools, and if you've got a big toolbox, you want to use the right tools at the right time. You've got a splinter, you're not going to say, Alan, get the sledgehammer. You're going to get Alan, get the tweezers, right? But if you want to break through something, you want to smash something down, you want to change something, you might want to try and do it with a pair of tweezers, you might want a sledgehammer. Now, those tools are actually available to us all, those qualities, the feminine and masculine qualities. And in the future, I see that men and women will be much more diverse and have access to all of that, but only if we teach them that. And we've got the tools in the men's movement. We know how to do this stuff. We're breaking through the background conversation that men are problems and women have problems. We know it's not like that. We have language for it. We talk about getting away from the deficit model and moving towards the generative model. Those of us do men's work. We know to come from the heart, not from the head, when we're helping our brothers. We know how to make a difference for men and boys. We have the skills, and those skills are not out there and being used right now as much as they could be. We could be making a much bigger difference. Men and for women for a future together.